Hey there, folks. It's Pops. We're going to talk about Masters of the Air, and I want your thoughts. How did you think it finished up for you? Did it finish strong? Is it sort of lackluster? I want to give you my thoughts. We're going to talk a little bit about the show as an overall, as well as kind of how because the finale, I thought, had a lot of great positives in it. Lots of action. It touched on all the different characters. It also feels kind of rushed because you have so much to do because you've meddled with so many different characters and story arcs, and then you have like a little 10-minute sort of like almost like post action stuff to get to. The show is sort of ambitious because they wanted to try to give the Air Force their due, but also I felt like it's overly cautious because they didn't want to. Well, they really should have probably done is done multiple seasons or done a mini series of hour and a half movies or something like that that would have focused more deeply and widely. Instead, what they wanted to do was sprinkle pieces in and make us all feel like it's connected. And in reality, is each character has their own journey. Each hero had done different things, and they didn't quite know how to do it. This was the best solution they could come up with. At times, I think it's great. Other times, I think it's okay. There's a lot of filler in there we didn't need. There's an expectation that we care more about characters, but they've been squeezed in at the last minute. I didn't do a video on episode 9, or I'm sorry, episode 8, which introduced the Tuskegee Airmen, which was very abrupt because we haven't had them. We've seen them in the credits, and then suddenly they're there, and you're like, we're just dropped in action. They're shot down. They're prisoners of war, and you're not really attached to them. They start to win you over, and now the season's going to end. We're just now enjoying those characters. So I don't know if the solution would have been to stagger sort of their story arcs or things like that. But to me, I think the show is just going to be considered second rate compared to the Pacific and definitely compared to Band of Brothers. So with that said, Masters of the Year. As I said, I think there are some elements that are great. This opening sequence where we finally see Rosie Rosenthal go down, right? So Rosie, if you know, has been on, he surpassed his 25 missions. They raised the bar for everyone else. He re-enlisted, re-upped. He didn't want to go and sort of like be put out to pasture. And it's this great sequence where he's still trying to save one. What turns out the person's already gone. But this sequence was fantastic. This is kind of what a lot of people want, is this type of stuff. So yeah, this was great. He basically lands in the middle of the Russians and the Germans. So he's literally in no man's land. He's in the middle of the conflict. He thinks he's going to get caught by the Germans. He doesn't know which ones are which. And there we go. So we ended up in the credits, which again are spectacular credits. And then we're back with our prisoners of war, Buck and Bucky. And they have at least had the most consistent of airtime. They've had the most screen time, if you will, for stories and things that we can get attached to. But at the same time, because we've had so much other stuff thrown at us, there's times where they're just taken away from us and we don't really know what's going on with them. And their life in the Stalag has really been pretty bland and uneventful. There's a lot of time spent on preparing for what that could happen. Maybe they're going to go on a run. They're going to try to escape, those kinds of things, but nothing that's really manifested into anything particularly interesting. So the Germans are in massive trouble, and we're at the point in the war where they know they're losing. So what they do is they move their prisoners, and literally in the snow, like in the middle of a blizzard. And this German guy he's becoming ill and staggers at one point, and one of the prisoners actually helps him. So you do see sort of that again. Is that propaganda? Is what? I don't know. It was fine. I liked it. I liked all of this. I like the fact that this is actually a topic in a show. Like we're going to discuss this actually happened. And then of course back with the American base, you have Crosby, who's still not quite sure where everybody is. He's definitely a different character at the end of the show. Now, I will say this felt very abruptly different than how we've seen him in the past. So I'm not saying I don't understand or see the story arc for Crosby. It's the fact that he kind of cruised along a certain way, got into like administrative roles, and then it seems like was just in the last episode or two, now we're supposed to believe he's like this bureaucrat and he's got this attitude, a chip on his shoulder and whatever. And I'm like, just didn't quite feel that transition. But this guy's got an attitude, he's got an arrogant attitude, and he's like, get out of the chair. And then we're back on the march. This is that shot I was telling you about where the American actually helps the German. And then the Germans are going by the prisoners of war, and you can see how defeated they are. So they've lost. They're getting boxed in. So this is post D-Day. It's a few months, and you're seeing we're in the winter now, so we're seeing them basically get boxed in with the Russians on the other end. So the Germans, we're getting close to VE Day when the Germans actually surrender. Then you have just a quick little shot of them trying to warm themselves and survive, and then they come to a decision of we're going to have to make a run for it. So they kind of come up with this plan, and once they get in here, they meet this guy from before, and they have their little strategy of how they're going to make a run for it. And Rosie's with the Russians, and he visits one of the camps. So this felt. So listen, I think this was great for Rosenthal and his character and him as a Jew. It feels so everything about this, and again, we're trying to follow some sort of timeline of how things happen. And the problem is that doesn't necessarily make it the best cinematic adaptation, because this feels like a motivation or something that we could have had earlier in the show in some other way. Now it's almost like too little too late. We're on episode 9. So, I mean, I like it. I get it. I do see this being a motivation for him as a character and him going forward as a human being. But as far as the impact for the show, impact for the audience, it's sort of like too little too late. I know I'm nitpicking. That's about what you get. It's not a bad show. So you're going to have to get with the nitpicking. This went on too long. And this is one of the other Jews who's just like, everybody's dead. Back on the German, they're going to make their run for it. And one doesn't make it. Yeah, they end up with like Hitler Youth. And he gets taken out, and then you have the one shot of Elvis having to do what he didn't want to do. So again, I didn't read the books. I don't know exactly what happened. This was good for his character. He is one of the performers that is so magnetic. You enjoy seeing him on screen. This was a fine sequence of how all of this plays out, of him having to make, life and death decisions and those kinds of things. So it was fine. So, and this was a longer episode than most of them. So that was good to see. We kind of had a longer episode to wrap things up with Crosby and Rosie and everybody there as things are kind of wrapping up, coming to an end, and everybody getting to be back together again. And this is again what I said about almost like a little too late, because it's like you end up with, they get to a place where the Russians or someone else can get them home, and they're kind of put back in where they can do airdrops for, feeding the Dutch and them interacting again. Seemed, great to see you again, because, like while Bucky did make a run for it and Bucky gets away, and while George gets caught, he gets shot. Buck doesn't get away. He kind of sacrifices, not sacrifices himself like mortally, but he sacrifices himself so Buck could get away. So Bucky stays behind. So the problem with all of these sequences and all of this at the end of this episode, and the end of the season rather, is that it's just so long. This is 45 minutes into the episode. We have 30 minutes left. Now there's credits and stuff. And the credits are long because you do get those like biographical side-by-side photos and stuff. But that's a lot of screen. This is a lot of screen time of them talking to things like that. So, okay. So this was in the prison camp where Bucky is still trapped. So Bucky's still trapped. The Germans haven't quite surrendered yet. You can see an Allied plane is flying in, and the Germans actually start shooting prisoners and stuff. So the plane ultimately takes him out, and you have Bucky climb to the top, puts a flag up there, so stuff like that. So Bucky gets his moment too. This was probably one of the highlights of the season. I don't want to say I'm surprised, but I felt like this is almost like stuff that would have been in the credits or in the promotional material. And I wish the flag would have moved. And I don't know. This was really good, though. This was really good. Let's see. We get back to, this is the actual surrender. And this is them doing airdrops. This is the kid. No, I think that's the mechanic, right? I think it's the mechanic. And he's never been in an airplane. They take him up with them. So now you have Rosie and Buck and Crosby in the plane. And they're doing their flyover to do their feeding, and it's just happy post-war stuff as everything's sort of unpacking and celebratory stuff, and things like that. And just lots of this kind of where are they going to go, what they going to do, and um, heartfelt, good stuff. It was fine. Everything about the show is fine. I don't have any major qualms with the show. That's part of the nitpicking, right? When you have a show that's kind of like a B plus or a B minus, and you kind of hover where the worst episodes are like a C, this is what you get. You get nitpicking, right? And I think the overall direction of the show, the overall thing is that the show is bogged down by having too many characters and stories, but yet not enough screen time for them. Like the Tuskegee are just sort of like they're dropped in, they have this quick thing, and then they're gone again. And they don't really have any moments that are relevant. And yet they make the post-credit scenes, even though there's probably other characters that we kind of know more, we see more of in the show. I don't even think we know whatever happened to the, I guess, a French spy that was pretending to be a British spy who was sleeping with Crosby. And then, yeah, we don't even address, because Crosby's wife's pregnant, we don't even address the fact that he was cheating on his wife with this woman. And did I miss that? I mean, maybe it was in a sequence and I just didn't catch it. But yeah, it's a solid B show. It's fine, especially compared to other content, but it doesn't hold a candle to the other stuff that had come before it. I like it. I like the fact that it's starting to at least create conversation and capture some of the moments and stuff that we can talk about and we can learn and give people some history. But I'm not going to pretend that it's historically accurate or that it's so well put together that it's something you can recommend to just anybody, or it's so incredibly rewatchable. So that's kind of my take. Love to hear from you guys. What else we should be watching? What else we should be thinking about? Reading the books, whatever. Love hearing from you so much. Thanks for everybody joining me and enjoying Masters of the Air. Appreciate you. Take care.